screen is online and I think I have audio, and for some reason people are actually watching. Go live. Hello, we are a few minutes early, but I figured I would try to get this set up. Also, the kiddo has decided to start setting her alarm for 7:59 in the morning, which okay, it's great that she wants to wake up early, but it also means that we'll probably have to figure out the timing and background audio and things like that. So, hello. I want to experiment with doing more videos and more narration and more demos of cool things. And here's an experiment. We're going to see if I can schedule live streaming and go through some of the cool things that I've come across or played around with over the past week or so. Maybe I can fish out the interesting bits of audio and screencasts from the stuff from the video afterwards. So let me just confirm that my audio actually works here. How do I do that? If I go into YouTube Studio, it'd be nice to have like this reassuring thing. Can anyone hear me? If you can hear me, you can put it in the chat, and I will worry less. Be nice. Let me see. Live chat. Okay, step one, checking. Does my audio still work? Say hi in the chat on YouTube, I guess, if you are listening. In the meantime, I'm going to try to figure out how I can listen to this stuff as a quick check. I have no idea. All right, I'm just going to try. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to trust that people will say hello if they can hear me. Okay, so my goal for these kinds of things is to do a recap of things I've come across and also use the time to record any demonstrations of cool stuff, because then I can theoretically pull it out of the video afterwards. So the first thing I want to mention is that we actually got an EmacsConf 2023 report together with statistics. Well, not a lot of statistics, just number of talks, number of hours of presentations, and Q&A, and all those other wonderful things, in a form that's suitable for posting on blog posts, that sort of stuff. So highlights, you have an overview of what kinds of talks were there, some quotes about some of the talks that lots of people liked, and technical details, a whole bunch of links to all the different tools that we used. Lots of process improvements this year. Early acceptance was very nice because that meant I could just keep saying yes to talks as they came in, and because we were starting with a 2-track schedule from the get-go, then that meant that I could just say yes to everything and trust that we would find a way to make it fit. Yes, oops, hang on a second, let me make sure I can see that. Okay, yes, so there we are. I tried to, oh, excellent, thank you so much for confirming that you can hear me, Sam. Yay. Eventually we'll probably hear other people too, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, so manual intervention. I did a lot of scripting to see if we could use crontab to keep the talks running on time, and it was fantastic. Although I think the hosts for the general and development track got a little amused by this, trying to stay ahead of the cron tab, so that they could introduce the next talk before the introduction would just kick in and do it for them. So that was cool. People also really appreciated the org files that I generated. In 2002, I generated them for maybe 5 time zones, and now I'm like, okay, we've got the do list macro. We just loop over all the time zones, and well, at least all the time zones by UTC offset plus by hourly UTC offset plus those couple ones in the that are half-hour offset from other things. So we wanted a separate time zone for them. Subhead, I added a bunch of features to that subtitle editor package to make it easier to adjust the timestamps and sync subtitles. The waveforms were very handy for that. And based on feedback, we started trimming the Q&A sessions to when the host leaves the conversation, because sometimes people get so carried away and they're like, oh, we're having this lovely conversation, and they forget it's recorded. So now I think when the host is there, people think, oh, this is still public. So they're easy, it's easier for them to remember that. And then we can just get permission from them afterwards to see if they want to share the rest of it, which is great. And then there were some things about OBS virtual webcams that maybe not so much. We'll try to keep things simpler next time. A whole bunch of things to remember for next year, and a ton of ideas for me to gradually explore over the next month or 2 or 3 or 4, 11 or something like that. So those are the reports. If you're curious about what it took to host it, all of that is also available. And of course, couldn't do any of this without all the wonderful volunteers who helped out. So you can find that report at emacsconf.org 2023 report, or let's see if this thing actually still works. Look at that, I have a QR code. I've been experimenting with ways to get QR codes because John Kitchen has them in his videos, and I think that's really cool. So I'll also post the links in the show notes, but just in case people are curious about it now, theoretically, this should work. I think it uses like Unicode box characters to make this, which I think is very cool and hacky. But of course, it's inside Emacs in the first place. So that's EmacsConf 2020 report. A couple of other things that I worked on recently. Someone asked about the animations that I had for my EmacsConf presentation, and I have now written a very long blog post with lots of detail. So this is that one, and it's on my blog. The title is Animating SVG Topic Maps with Inkscape, Emacs, FFmpeg, and Reveal.js. And the idea there is I can draw these things on my Supernote or on an iPad, and I can animate them, but I don't like animating things by hand because, fiddly things. So instead, I can either take the SVG and animate each element one by one, like in this one, or I can specify the IDs to animate, such as in my EmacsConf presentation. So here I have a special export that focuses mostly on the maps. And you can see here how I try to highlight what the previous one is and then the current one. And so as I go through my presentation, it builds up. This is great because that means I don't have to try to figure out how to make everything make sense in a linear way. My brain doesn't work like that. It just likes to jump all over the place. So I can just draw a map and hope that it can help people find their way around, and it can help me find my way around. So the blog post goes into a lot of detail on how to get the data. So if I'm using Adobe Fresco on the iPad, for example, I can export a PDF. And the nice thing about this PDF is that when I convert it to an SVG, all the elements are individual elements, and they're in the file in drawing order, which is great because then I can animate that with this code, and it just goes one after the other, and it changes the fill opacity and fills that in. And the result is this kind of image using this very handy little FFmpeg command to create an animated GIF or GIF, however you pronounce that. But most of the time, I'm not using the iPad or Adobe Fresco to draw things because usually the kiddo likes to use the iPad. So and also because at night I like to draw on the Supernote A5X. It's e-ink, so it doesn't trigger my kiddos, oh, you're on a screen, I should be on a screen too, sort of thing. So I can draw on it, and she's okay with that. And the downside of that is that when I export a PDF from it and convert that into SVG, the whole thing is like one big element per color. So all the black text is one big element. And if I break it apart so that I can then combine it into smaller paths, then the outlines, the paths inside other things, like this letter A over here, are also filled. And I have to go and combine that in Inkscape in order to get that to look like the way that I expect it to. I used to do all of this, like, pre-processing in Inkscape, where I would break, convert the PDF and then change the colors of the highlights from the gray that the Supernote exports to a more of a yellow highlighter color, and then break it apart. But since SVG is just text, it's an XML format. I have now written an Emacs list function that takes a PDF, runs it through PDF to Cairo, and then finds the highlights, changes the color of the highlights, and breaks everything apart, and actually moves the first moves the black text below the highlights. I mean, above the highlights, below highlights in the file. So what happens here is I have this file at the end of this process. So then I have to go into Inkscape and then select different sections of the image, which is a little bit of a tricky process, as I think Inkscape doesn't even have a proper lasso command. You just have to do rectangular selections. Anyhow, and then I use the Control K, or was that Control Shift? One of those keyboard shortcuts, maybe it's Control K, to combine the different groups until they're like they look nice. This is tedious, but less tedious than doing the whole thing from scratch, I guess. So the other thing that I want to do there is, if there are combined shapes, Supernote exports them as one element. So if I want to break them apart, like these two arrows over here, they're touching just ever so slightly, and so they're one shape. So if I want to break those apart so I can animate them separately, I have to draw a line, select the combined shape, and then select my new line, and then I can use Fracture to split apart those paths in Inkscape. So once I have those that SVG with the different elements, then I can set the IDs for them, and that uses the object properties over here. Now, I haven't quite figured out the keyboard shortcuts for Inkscape. I'm not sure there are that many, at least for things like setting the ID and going to the next element and setting the ID for that one, and so on and so forth. So I have a little AutoKey script, and on Windows I would use AutoHotkey instead, but since I'm on Linux I get to use actual Python. So I have an AutoKey script to click on that ID file, ID text box, and then move things back to, move the mouse point back to the element I'm looking at, so that I can type the ID for it. This is still rather annoying. So as you can imagine, an Emacs function would make this a whole lot easier. And the way that I do that is I have now a function that identifies the paths for me. This is how it works. What it does is it takes the image and it then temporarily highlights or changes the fill color of one of the elements, and then it prompts me for an ID for that element. Then it saves that ID in the SVG, which, again, remember, it's just a text file with XML, so you can just use Emacs Lisp to fiddle with it. And then it just goes through all of the elements that I haven't identified yet. And if I need to take a break because I'm getting interrupted by something, or I want to do something else, then I can just stop anytime because it saves it after each of these steps. And for the really small elements, I've also kind of figured out how to add this little bounding box to it so I can see where it is, which took a little bit of understanding how SVGs work. And the code for that is in this my SVG identify paths thing, where it displays the image and then just keeps doing that. Now, this calls a couple of functions that are not in this excerpt. So one of the other things I figured out this week is how to link to the context of a function, so that people can then go look at that in more detail and find the other things that I've put in there. My configuration file is rather large, but I hope these links will make it easier to get into. And James is like, yeah, it's a lot of fun working with images in Emacs. So now that I've got this SVG with simplified elements, and then I've given them IDs that make sense to me instead of like path 205, then I can sort these. And the way that I can sort this is I can just pass it a list of IDs, and I have some code that will look for those elements with those IDs and then just remove them from the SVG and re-add them so that they end up in the right order. I hear the kiddo is awake, so I'm going to like point her to the food in the fridge, and she can go have lunch in the living room. Breakfast in the living room. Anyway, this also gives me a table of file names, which means that if I want to use a specific frame in a presentation, I can grab that one and say, okay, this is when this one got turned on, or set to full opacity, and the result is something like this, where I can step through things one at a time, and give people something to look at when I'm recording a video or something like that. And again, that's Emacs Lisp handling the stepping through it and writing the images. That one over there at the end there needs fixing. And I think I just need to set the it's because I need to set the mix blend mode. Okay, so that's a to do for me, to fix the mix blend mode for everything. Okay, so that's one style of doing it, and the way that works, as I mentioned, is it just looks for all those IDs, removes them, and then re-adds them, and then it all ends up in the right order. But I also wanted to have a different kind of animation that wasn't just based on one element after another. So I wanted to be able to say, okay, I want to highlight this part of my map and that part of my map because those are related to my current topic. And the way that I do that is, at least for the presentation that I did for EmacsConf, I knew I wanted to use Reveal.js for it because Reveal.js is snazzy, and also because it would make it easier for me to drop in all sorts of other dynamic elements and export the whole thing as an org file, as a long document as well. So I'm using org.reveal to have all of those images and stuff like that together. Okay, so a couple of things that I needed to have for this. I needed to include the full contents of an SVG, because if you're just using an image tag, you can't use CSS to override parts of it. But if you're including all of the markup, then you can use CSS to override the styles. And then I wanted to be able to specify on this slide, I want to highlight these things, and then I want to highlight these things after that. And then I want to add these elements to the map to make them start showing up in black instead of very light gray. So all of my slides are identified with a custom ID property, and these IDs are on the right side. HEmail or TEmail or email properties are the IDs that I set in the SVG file. So then I have a very messy piece of CSS that looks for the present attribute, the present class that Reveal.js adds to the current slide, and it uses a transition to animate highlighting that. So if in general the paths are set to very, very light. If it's the current slide, then we fill in we fill it in and use the opacity as specified. And this is actually very, very long, but it's all hidden in a drawer, so I don't have to care about how messy it is. And then the result there is, as I'm going through the presentation, it builds up incrementally. So this is the code that actually does it. It generates the CSS rule for it by including all of the, figuring out the very, very long selectors, and then figuring out the rules and just putting it all together. So the result is that animation that I showed previously. So here I've exported the presentation just focusing on the maps, so you don't have to listen to, 20 other minutes of me talking about EmacsConf. Although if you want to, you can. It's one of the talks at EmacsConf 2023. Anyway, so this is how that whole thing works. For EmacsConf 2023 itself, we like to play videos so that all the technical issues are taken care of, and we can test all these things beforehand and caption them. So I basically just opened up a browser, started simple screen recorder, and then and played my presentation on autoplay with audio narration, so that I didn't even have to talk through the presentation, because talking and doing things at the same time is getting to be a bit of a challenge. My brain can only do so many things. So I have lots of ideas for next steps for this. Primarily, being able to use this with things that are not handwritten sketches could make it a lot faster, in the sense that you could just toss a few lines into GraphViz and have it make an SVG for you, and then maybe animate that. It could be fun. And then a whole bunch of other things there. So that's another fun thing that I've been working on lately. And you can find that at this URL or on my blog. So if you look for animating SVG topic maps, it's probably very esoteric, but it was fun to make. And I think if I can combine that with the experiments with speech recognition, you might have some really interesting, I can say, okay, at this part of my transcript, I want to get to this frame in this, in this animation. Should be fun. Another fun thing that I played around with this week is using Embark more. So here, for example, I've been using Embark and QR encode to have these handy little QR codes, theoretically making YouTube videos a little easier to work with in terms of links. And that is super easy. It's really just use the QR code and store it and display it in a side window, because we can do that. And I actually just figured out how to do that today. I usually just let display buffer, pop to buffer decide what to do with things, but this time I wanted to show up on the right. And then Embark allows me to have contextual actions. So I can say, okay, when I'm calling this from when my point is on an org link, I want to show a subset of actions and make it easier for me to select one of them. So here, if I press Control dot, which is my shortcut for Embark, I have the which key? I have the which key configuration suggested on the Embark README. So it's a more compact display, and this one just says Q, which is the show QR code. So that was cool, and the other I've been using Embark for a bunch of other things. Links to things and all that stuff, because it reduces my mental load a lot. I don't have to think about what commands I want to use, and I don't have to think about where to find a keyboard shortcut that is available in all the different modes that I want to be able to use this feature from. I can just throw it into a context menu and hope I can find it. So this is how. So this is something else that I've been adding. I want to be able to find stuff, link to stuff, and write about stuff without having to care about where on my computer it is or where on the web it is. So I have a lot of org custom links. I have org custom links for Emacs.conf.l files or files in like projects or whatever, because it's so much easier to just type, for example, Emacs.conf. Here, let me show you. Control-C, Control-L inserts a link with completion. So if I say Emacs.conf.l, I want to link to an Emacs Lisp file, and this one jumps straight to that file for me, so I don't have to navigate to the directory and find it and so on and so forth. But I also want it to publish the web, if I'm publishing this to a blog post, I want to have the URL for it instead of this Emacs.conf.l link, which only works for me. And the way that I can do that is I can resolve it with an export function. So here, for example, I define an export function. Here we are. I use a macro to define it, actually, because I found myself doing the same thing again and again for different types of files, different types of projects. And so it just exports the link using the URL base that I have here. And I think Codeberg might be back. I'm not sure, but it's been relatively easy to switch it back and forth depending on what I want to use. So the idea there is if I export something like this, SHO, then Emacs.conf publish should theoretically, if I haven't messed up, yes, it'll go straight to the web version of it. So now I can write blog posts, and I don't have to care about where the repositories are published. I can just write about the file, and it will go to go to where the file is published on the web. So I thought that was pretty fun, and I've been using it more and more. Yeah, so I like that. It is this one over here. And then that got me thinking about what else I can do with it now that I've gotten the actual link on the web. So for example, if I'm writing an email to somebody, I might want to send them a link to something, but org mode links don't work in that context. So I want to be able to copy the URL to something. And in that case, I have an Embark thing that now lets me theoretically say U, I think, copies it. Yeah. So if I press Control dot and then U, then I can just copy the URL to the web thing. And Aldrich has a suggestion to, to pass it through the Wayback Machine, so that just in case there's bit rot, people forget that they stop paying for the websites or whatever, people can still use the links because it's going to go through the Wayback Machine, and they can get that copy of it. So that I think might be a cool idea. Let's go add that as a to-do somewhere here. Whoops. How do I get? Sorry. Okay, to-do. Wayback Machine for URLs from Aldrich. All right. Cool. Yeah. So where was I? Okay. So copy web link. That is awesome. And then I can now also store if I store the link, then I can use that as well as for copying it. So there are two approaches to this actually. One is I can special case it when I copy the URL. So my copy link here takes the current file, sees if it's in part of any of those projects that I mentioned, and then if it is, then it copies a URL based on the configuration. And then I can do special cases like, or if I'm copying it from my, if I'm storing a link from my Emacs configuration, then I can link to that specific section. Or if I'm storing it from a blog post, then I can look at the permalink and add it to my URL in order to get the URL for that, and other fun things. But another approach I can use is I can just use the links, the custom links that I've stored, and then I can resolve that by exporting the link to HTML, and then just grabbing the URL from it. So here's this with this one, reuses orgs like export all the things that I have and that other people have built for exporting links in different protocols to HTML, and then it just parses that region, finds the first link, and then grabs the href from it, and ta-da! That's my final link. So that's a way of very quickly resolving these custom URLs into a form that other people can take advantage of, and this is how I can add it to Embark's org link map, so I can use that. And then since I have this project list, then I can just throw that into ripgrep and search through everything in those files theoretically. So if I'm looking for subed record compile get segment, subed record compile, or some other thing like that, then consult gives me this preview. So I'm searching through all the different projects in that list, and Omar actually helped me figure out how to store a link to it right from here. So the other nice thing about Embark is you don't even have to add custom key bindings to a map. You can just press Control dot, which is your usual, or whatever thing that you've bound to Embark Act, and then you can put in your usual key binding. Like here, my global key binding for org store link is Control-C-L. And then of course something, for some reason my Embark targets have been symbols instead of strings, so I need to look into that later. But theoretically that would work and give you a thing. So now I have to just watch out for these things being symbols for some reason. I don't know, maybe something in org has changed recently. So that's a thing for me to do. To figure out what's going on with symbols and Embark. Why am I getting them instead of strings? but that's cool. Theoretically, I could capture a link from there. So that's another fun thing that I have recently played around with. Okay, in about 15 minutes, I have to go log into the kiddos' virtual school. It's she's in virtual grade 2, so which is actually working out really well for us. But I have 15 minutes to answer questions, chat, brain dump lots of other things. Um, Thank you for tuning into to this Yay Emacs experiment. We'll see how it works. Yes, do you have any questions, comments, feedback, ideas, things to add to my to-do list? Let's see how it goes. I'm pleasantly surprised that FFmpeg streaming seems to be holding up. This computer does not like doing OBS, and apparently OBS does not like doing older computers now anyway. But maybe FFmpeg is the way for me to go. And yeah, so I'm just going to like twiddle my thumbs. How does this work when people are like are live streaming? I am just pleasantly amazed that we have like 10 viewers in this, this scheduling thing might be a possibility. Thank you also for dropping by, Aldrich. Yeah, so I'm kind of curious about the idea of scheduling in the sense that it makes things more predictable. I am doing it on top of a slightly unpredictable life. Like today, the cat decided to wake me up at 5 o'clock instead of at 6:30. And 6:30 is already earlier than the 7:30. Oh, okay. So it is a little slow. I should remember to pause and slow down. Yeah, so my frame rate is, I think, maybe a little low for this. That probably means that if I'm going to do this a lot, then it might make sense for me to finally upgrade from my computer, which is it's a lovely X230, and also like thinking of the next thing to upgrade to is a bit of a hassle. So I've been trying to put it off, but I can I think I have a local recording, and we'll see how well that also works. But of course, better frame rate is probably better for asking questions live. And you're welcome, Tenjin. Thanks for thanking me also. So this is a fun experiment. We'll see how it works. There's always stuff to talk about. I wasn't quite sure because I was thinking, I'm just going to schedule it, and I don't know what I will have on my list. And then of course I promptly got distracted by half a dozen rabbit holes and things to play with in Emacs. And so now I'm like, okay, let's just move through all these blog posts. Okay, so I had to figure out the and you're welcome also, Conway. The frame rate thing. I wonder. I experimented previously with using using Jitsi. Using a Jitsi web conference to screen share my laptop, which is all set up and everything, to the W530 that the kiddo, usually just uses for Minecraft, and then use that to stream. I think I actually shared it with a Surface Book. So there's a Surface Book also that I can tap for experimentation purposes. But I tended to forget to check that the Jitsi web conference was still streaming my laptop screen. So experiments. But yeah, we'll see. I figure more brain dumps are good. This will help me record some video and narrations for the things that might have might benefit from them. And whatchamacallit, and what was the other reason? Is that weird? Oh yes, and let people ask me questions that that can help me flush the things out, so that I can remember to write about the things that I'm taking for granted. And yes, I'm glad the frame rate isn't terrible. Isn't getting in the way too much. I just have to remember to stop and slow down. And that also reminds me to stop and slow down when I'm talking. But I just get really excited about all this stuff, and I'm trying to squeeze everything in before the kiddo wakes up. So I just have to remember, okay, got a couple of seconds before everything updates and everyone can see the same thing. But it's all cool. So yes. I actually did hack together a words per minute counter, and I tried it during that podcast interview with Yuri and Leo, and I kept apologizing for going over 200 words per minute. It's just, and, you know, that's why people can play things back at 75% speed or whatever. It'll be fine. Okay. Anyway, so what's coming up for me next is next week I will try to find a possibly different time for a scheduled stream. Might be Sunday because the kiddo might sleep in. I don't know. The kiddo's doing a reasonable job of sleeping in at the moment, despite her alarm clock having been set. She's been setting her alarm clock. I'm like, it's up to you. It's fine. So we'll figure out when that is, and I have no idea how to make things faster. Well, actually, let me find out whether I'm, am I thrashing because of memory? Actually, it says my CPU isn't so high, so maybe so CPU is okay, and memory is still okay. So I think what I just need to do is fiddle with my. Well, I was experimenting with my bitrate and trying to find out the FFmpeg command that would let me send things without the speed being too low. So I'm way below I ended up settling on a bitrate that is way below YouTube's recommended. But maybe I can tinker around with that some more and see if a higher bitrate is manageable. But yeah. Actually, no. CPU is now way up there also. Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, that definitely tells me that FFmpeg here is not being terribly happy about the CPU bound. Even though, like, I have to learn how to understand these things. So yeah, we'll see. I'm really liking this workflow of recording very quick videos to demonstrate something and sticking them into the blog posts. I'm looking forward to doing enough of that it makes sense to get an additional block storage on my Linode, that sort of thing. I think that would be a good use of money if I'm like doing enough videos that it makes sense to just increase the hosting space. This one, I don't have the CPU, happiness to run OBS in the first place. This whole thing is being run off FFmpeg, and I am on there you go. It says it's a 4-core i5 at 2.6 gigahertz. It's an X230 tablet, which it's a very comfortable machine, but maybe I just have to stream like I'm in 2012 instead of in 2023. And actually, where is this? In my, I think I have some notes here on streaming. Stream. Yeah, so this is how I'm currently streaming. I have something that just takes my second screen, my laptop, my primary screen. The second screen is for looking at the chat, and then grabs the audio from system audio and from the microphone. Theoretically, that means that if I'm going to show off things like Subed, I can jump around to different parts of videos and all that stuff. And then this is like my max rate. 690K was I think the speed was a bit rate that let me keep roughly the right speed, roughly real time speed, but FFmpeg incantations are usually beyond me. I have no idea how to improve this aside from blindly hacking around it and trying different numbers. So if somebody has a lot more experience with FFmpeg streaming from old computers, that would be great. Or I guess I could just look at the ThinkPad subreddit to see what I would eventually want to upgrade to. So, it's kind of like, well, the longer I wait, the easier it is to, the more powerful machines get. And I really still don't have a lot of focus time. I have basically this teeny bit of time that I have in the mornings, plus whatever time throughout the day that I can squeeze in when the kiddo wants to just watch another Minecraft tutorial video. So it's like, well, I don't really want to get a really powerful machine that's just going to sit on the kitchen counter for 90% of its life. I don't know. So we'll see. But it's kind of fun to show quick demos of workflows, because that's the sort of thing that sometimes is hard to get from blog posts or code. So if I get the hang of using Simple Screen Recorder to record those small snippets, and then maybe use live streaming as a way to flesh them out into more notes, that way I don't get stuck in trying to write a script and edit it and make it all nice and then compile it a gazillion times because I catch a little error or I want to tweak it or whatever else. Then it's a possibility. But I've got 8 minutes before I have to log into virtual class. We have this really, we have a full exemption from synchronous learning for virtual school, which means the kiddo is enrolled in virtual school at the local public school. But her teachers are okay with her just doing the homework. And it works out really well for us because she's, she has a lot of fun with math and reading. And so there's she gets bored sitting in class, in front of in front of the computer, while all of her other classmates are going through the basics again. So our deal is, as long as she gets the homework done and she gets some exercise, then she can use the day for other things. But I still log in and say hi at the attendance, because usually her usual teacher knows, but sometimes they have substitute teachers. So I explained to them this whole setup that we have, and just very few words. Yes, so that's what I got in a few minutes. But thank you everyone for dropping by and joining me for this experiment. I will see you around. You can always find me on my blog or leave comments here or email me or find me in Mastodon or all the other wonderful places. So I will figure out what's... well, actually, all the things are already blog posts, and I will post the links in the video description once I figure out how that works. Thank you so much. Have a great day.